Well now, a huge welcome to you to my channel, The Magic of Java. This is my fourth book in the series, and this is called The Phoenix and the Creatures of Darkness. Now I want to emphasise that this is a novel, and only a novel. Yes, it is based on real people, even some celebrities, and real events. But I need to apologise to you if you feel you've identified yourself, because that was never my intention. The intention is for this simply to be a novel, an entertainment for you. The Tarot and the Meaning of Life. 2020 went out without a whimper, but unable to go out, we went to bed early, although were woken by fireworks at midnight to wish each other Happy New Year. But that was the only New Year's greeting I received. It was as though everybody had decided that 2020 had been so bad it was not worth seeing out, and 2021 so unpredictable it was not worth seeing it in. The news from Gunung Kidul was not good. The lumps on Yanni's brother's head had returned and sound to be serious. The hospitals confirmed Parcano's diagnosis, and from what I can understand of the prognosis, Parcano's herbal remedies sound at least as effective as anything a hospital might prescribe. It would seem that his wife has been borrowing money from moneylenders, and without him being able to come to Jakarta to sell his bamboo gifts, he's worried about how they will be able to repay the loans, especially as he has closed his warrant to focus on his health. Maddie also heard from Mas Purwa's daughter, who wants to come and stay with us in Jakarta while she looks for work, but she wants to bring her daughter with her and has not told Mas Purwa. And now I believe that her best option is to come to Jakarta, but not with her 2-year-old daughter, and not during the health restrictions. But I said nothing, as these things have a habit of sorting themselves out in Indonesia, certainly without my intervention. Yanni's 2-year-old son spoke to us on WhatsApp, and upon seeing Maddie and I, ran to the door to visit our home in Gunung Kidul, not realising we were far away in Jakarta. Apparently, at 10 o'clock each day, he visits our house attempting to see us. One morning, Yanni found him underneath the passion fruit, shouting for us to open the doors. Yanni's son has now worked out how to use his mother's mobile phone, and Maddie now receives numerous voicemails with him crying out her name and clearly upset that she's not there. But she also receives similar calls from his uncle, Mas Purwa, who's only a few years younger than I. Later I found that the 2-year-old was not quite so adept, and that all of Yanni's contacts had received voice messages crying out for Maddie. A few months later he could use the phone, or at least WhatsApp, and began to call Widati in the mornings, waking her up. Nevertheless, only a few months after writing this, Yanni's son and Mas Purwa's granddaughter, both now free, have become adept at using mobile phones. Indeed, they're displaying the same sort of unhealthy addiction that us adults do. They appear to be mesmerised by the phones, unaware of what is happening in the outside world, which must be the real point of mobile phones. They also have a minuscule attention span, changing programs and channels the moment they do not engage them. What tremendous damage is being done to mankind, and what hope is there for children who've become addicted to phones at the age of 3? Almost going beyond the emotional zombies Sam Vaknin describes for the under 35s. We also found that Mas Purwa is not coping well with the death of his son, and appears to be slowly descending into depression. I don't read too much into these events, but I could, not least as my Duke and brother-in-law and Mas Purwa have always been at loggerheads. These events do illustrate how we have integrated into the desa and now seen as spiritual leaders, maybe Parkano's representatives in the desa. Indeed, Mas Perwa called Maddie and told her how sad he was. Maddie explained that he was manifesting his own problems and that he could be more positive, things would get better. Maybe nothing unusual, except that some 3 years ago, Maddie had lost her mind through worry. We visited Block M and Carrefour to find them a pale reminder of its former selves. There are now so few fresh and Western products in Carrefour that the cheap local supermarket, Harry, now has a better selection. Now, there are two problems with shopping in Harry. The first is that for some reason, people take a trolley and half fill it with groceries before blocking one of the narrow aisles and then hot-footing it to Carrefour to do the shopping. The other is that Harry's Chinese owner offers a service to local Chinese families. They pick up the elderly, especially grandmothers, in people carriers and give them bucket hats to wear. They're then taken to the supermarket and encouraged to walk around as slowly as they possibly can, although many need no encouragement. The younger and more agile get round in half a day before being taken home, but some don't even complete the circuit in a day, or at least they don't realise that they have. In fact, Block M was a little sad with so many stores we used to patronise having closed down. We always used to eat nasi padang at Sari Ratu, although it became nothing like as good and incredibly expensive, but that has also closed. Fortunately, we found a smaller nasi padang cafe, which was much better and cheaper, and incredibly the owner remembered Maddie from when she had a store in Block M. Also, Coco from the Chinese pharmacy remembered me, which brought a smile to my face as he's such a funny man. He explained to Maddie that she was lucky as I had brought herbal remedies for my virality from him, whilst Indonesian men would not waste their money on their wives. We finally fixed the long-term problems with our water pump, but then the roof started to leak above the bedroom. Maddie at last remembered that her hairdresser's husband was a roofer, who came round and offered us a long-term solution. After nearly 10 years of being given solutions, which would have cost the same as rebuilding a new home, this was a tremendous relief. It came after I had given up on ever finding a solution, so whilst not the best time with Widiati's operation, it does show how changes always happen when you release them into the world. The new year also saw the storming of the US Senate by Trump supporters. And now I'm sure that Trump is a psychopath. After all, how else could you become President of the United States? But there are many of the conspiracies that I've followed attributed to Trump and his supporters. Can the destruction of truth in America be solely attributed to Trump? Can the malignant narcissist, certainly the malignant narcissist, is quite capable of destroying the organisation they control, rather than admit to being wrong? History tells us this, and it keeps repeating, but our memories are weak and manufactured by controlling narcissists. Or is the group denial because the truth that narcissists are destroying humanity too difficult to accept? From a moral point of view, there's no excuse for terrorist acts, regardless of the motives of the situation under which they are carried out. Jürgen Habermas. Could it be that Trump and his supporters are victims of psychopathic abuse by narcissists who are of a higher order than he? The manufacture of conspiracies and the accusation of people being conspiracy theorists is so reminiscent of the psychopathic abuse I endured. Like the 11th of September, there's plenty of evidence that the threat was not known long before it occurred. yet the security was lower than normal. Then the censorship of the social media is so reminiscent of how I was isolated from my family and friends. The parallels are so strong. But then again, I cannot help but consider that Trump is playing a predetermined role and is a part of an overall conspiracy. It will take years for the truth to be revealed. But I know for sure that these events are traumatising an already traumatised population. And the real question is, how did such a callous psychopath become leader of the world's most powerful country? Perhaps the case of Jacob Angelelli Chelsea, the QAnon shaman, best illustrates how these conspiracies have destroyed the minds and lives of people and is a lesson to us all, especially me. That Trump has not pardoned Chansley has destroyed the belief which motivated Chansley, along with many others who've become victims of the conspiracy. Whatever the truth, can it be justified that the President of the United States is banned from social media? And now there's an argument that social media has a responsibility to its shareholders. But the lack of regulation of social media is because they claim not to be publishers. And this feels very much like an editorial decision. Trump may well have distorted the truth and created his own fantasies, but unlike the executives of social media companies, he was elected. Whatever you may think of the electoral process. Of course, the FBI would argue that foreign agencies have undermined American democracy and created this chaos. And there certainly is some evidence to support this view. But how can we keep allowing these largely unaccountable agencies to flourish when they're destroying the very fabric of our countries and with it humanity itself? Perhaps more importantly, how and why should we trust them? An alternative explanation to these conspiracies is that they're part of a business model of the new media. In short, conspiracies drive traffic. And now this does not in itself have to be another conspiracy, for the new media companies have found that emotions drive traffic and that some of the strongest emotions, especially outrage, are influenced by conspiracies. But here's a real paradox. I've argued that narcissists feed off our emotions and attempt to make us emotional. Also that we're infected with mind parasites which do the same, but have never considered how like social media these are. But then again, is it evidence of the vampire castle? I also uncovered another security service agent posting on YouTube, this time from Israel, and intent on creating divisions within Islam, or maybe even in creating Islamic terrorists. But as I read the aggressive and provocative comments, I realised that this wasn't a person, but simply a bot on some predictive behaviour AI, and our responses were training it. I called its bluff, although of course even this helps with the training. Another very accommodating poster wanted to know how I had reached this conclusion, and I came to the conclusion that this was the programmer. Looking back, I've made friends a number of times on YouTube with people who have disappeared. So are these the programmers tapping my brain to improve their AI? Probably yes. The greatest cruelties of this century have been the impersonal cruelties of remote decisions, of systems and routine, especially when it can be justified as regrettable operation necessity. Eric Hobsbawm. But my tarot cards have been suggesting for a long while that Branwell is behind some energy that I feel, which mirrors feelings that I've had some time, and found them difficult to truly comprehend. One reading made me think that Branwell was actually one of his mother's flying monkeys. Now this does make sense. Branwell would have been somewhat codependent on his mother, and she would continue to have hold on him. I believed him to be also a psychopath, which may be true, but he could simply be doing her bidding. This would certainly explain why I had to wait for some 5 hours before meeting up with him in Manchester, and how he simply flitted away my life savings. It's always been clear to me that Branwell was being used by his mother to harm me, but this really does illustrate the depraved lengths that the psychopath will go to impose their will. This could also mean that his mental health team are the flying monkeys, which would again explain so much. Poor Branwell, I really do believe that he has deep-rooted mental health problems, probably the schizophrenia that he's told me he has. But to be being used in this way by his mother is beyond what I could even contemplate as evil. Could this even be the lesson to get me to reconsider my own thoughts on evil? I say probably schizophrenia, as for some time in my heart of hearts I have known not to trust anything he tells me. Indeed, since becoming a teenager, it's been impossible to get the truth out of him. How much of his mother's manipulation of him, and how much of his character, albeit shaped by his mother, I may never know. His lying would seem to be a reaction to realising that at a young age that his mother had lied. I know that as a teenager I habitually lied to my mother, as she was never prepared to accept the truth. But eventually I became a truth seeker, and later still I stopped lying even to my mother, but not until I was middle-aged. If he is a flying monkey, he is jealous of his mother's power, particularly over me, but actually probably resents his mother. But I must consider that Branwell is every bit as evil as his mother, and whatever my feelings, I must guard against this. Of course, there exists a further dimension to this. If Branwell has been told that he's not actually my son, nevertheless, I don't think I can blame my ex-partner for the problems with my bank in Indonesia. Or can I? Yes, Branwell is jealous of his mother, but also of me. I've now realised that both Branwell and his mother are jealous of my optimism and aura, so jealous that they're on a mission to destroy my very being. Certainly, after leaving my ex-partner, I felt completely drained of any power, as though everything that I had been taken away from me, and it has taken some 6 years to recover, and still not completely. I have to conclude that Branwell is the same, and whatever the truth about his paternity, I have to give him a wide berth as his mother. Less than a month after arriving in Jakarta, it went back into lockdown, which I assume means that I'm unable to travel back to Gunung Kidul. Being in Jakarta is bad enough, but being stuck in a house in Jakarta will send me to distraction. That night we heard from Om Cecilio, who is still suffering the opposite fate in Boyolali, as he sent us pictures of him looking very bored to prove his point. Later we heard that the virus was now so rampant in Jogja, including Gunung Kidul. Pakano's daughter had already got the virus, so returning home is looking somewhat remote, despite really wanting to get back to my garden. The day after finding this out, I was told that the bank needed confirmation of my nationality. Now, this is an ongoing problem with my bank. I visited their branches many times and send them my forms and photocopies over the last 3 years. But whatever I do, it never seems to suffice. I've opened an account with another bank when I was in Jakarta in August, because my main bank kept threatening to suspend my account unless I provided with information they already had. Partially annoyed with my main bank and partially paranoid about their real motives of needing my nationality confirming, I decided to start transferring money from my main bank to the other. The other reason for my paranoia was that my tarot cards told me to be careful with documents this week. As I didn't have my alternative bank details here in Jakarta, I decided to log on to the mobile site to retrieve them. But the app's been updated and wanted permission to take photos and access my photos which I withheld. Effectively, this blocked me out of the app and therefore my ability to move money around. I need to visit the branch, assuming that this is possible during the lockdown. Was the warning contained in the tarot? Whatever, it does highlight how the technology we're all being forced into using can suddenly create enormous problems for their customers, especially we want to opt out of surveillance capitalism. My tarot kept pointing to there being huge revelations of betrayal coming soon. And given that there's been so much betrayal, and this is my dark night of the soul, this is both expected and welcomed by me. Some 2 years ago, my bank claimed that the signature that I had used for some 45 years had changed, which it hadn't, demanding that I go to a branch and resubmit it. Then my bank card stopped working in ATMs. At the time, I wonder if somebody at the bank was purposely creating problems for me because I was a foreigner. I later rejected this when I found that my card wasn't working because of the bandwidth my bank had on the new ATM network. But now I'm having multiple problems. I'm wondering again if there's some subterfuge at the bank. Is it simply an employee doesn't like foreigners? Or is it a managerial decision because there is something unattractive about my business? Or an AI algorithm spotting me to be different to the average customer and simply requesting multiple checks? Whatever, the account is becoming impossible to use. What is their motive? Is it that we should be locked out of our bank accounts? Or more likely, that nobody gives a shit anymore? This is so reminiscent of when Maddie was ill and I became completely stymied by anything official. Partly it was that so many documents I needed were left in Jakarta when we fled. But the other issue was that my mind was clouded by lead and I could not focus on remembering passwords, etc. Especially as I'd become paranoid regarding almost everything in my life. I guess to a degree these are memories that I will always be somewhat scarred and affected by. Of course, once I get into these cycles, then the memory of these terrible events floods back. And I become even more incapable of sorting out the difficulties. The requests and threats to suspend my account kept coming every 2 months. Apparently this was seen as quite normal. As included in the requests was the threat to suspend my account. And there was also a disclaimer that if I'd already updated the details, I was to ignore the email. I found my next bank account to have been effectively suspended, with me unable to make payments from it. When I opened this account many years ago, I was given a small machine which generated a number to input when making transactions. Well, it would seem that this machine had been withdrawn, and I needed to visit the branch to set up a new system. But nobody informed me about this. They simply stopped the service. This is a branch with only branches in the major cities, and I live up a mountain in the middle of nowhere, and there are travel restrictions due to the health crisis. When I did get to Jakarta, I found that my 2 closest branches had closed. I spent half a day looking for a branch and then resubmitting documents and sorting out my problems. But then I started getting phone calls asking for Maddie's name, yet another copy of my passport, and then finally a message saying that the address change that I had requested had been completed, but I'd not done anything of the sort. I was going to say that this was the last straw and close the account, but there is a fee for closing accounts in Indonesia, so like everyone else, I now have an account with very little money in it. Now these are the people that we're expected to believe that the world's economies are safe in their hands and that nothing could go possibly wrong with electric money. Or could it be more sinister that we can expect regular communications threatening dire consequences that we should ignore, so that they can sneak one in that we should not ignore, and then we face the dire consequences. Some months after writing this, I came across the idea that of a super-flying monkey, which one commentator called a lieutenant. Could Branwell actually be his mother's lieutenant? That lieutenant is also a narcissistic secondary source. So yes, he is a victim, but his loyalty to his mother also means that he is willing to join her in her manipulation of me. This would mean that my engagement and conversation with Branwell were being fed back to his mother, even directed by her. So my no contact with the mother was also a lack of contact at all. And was I still providing her with energy? How then do I interpret that we are no longer in contact? Has Branwell broken free of his mother? Probably not. His mother was manipulating him to drain me of money. Then, when I said there would be no more, he realised that this particular game was over. So the draining of my money and sending me into poverty was all being directed by my ex-partner, using Branwell and her lieutenant as his mental and his mental health team as her flying monkeys. Now, I've never felt that my ex-partner was a particularly measured psychopath, just clever and ruthless, and this particular plot exposes how ruthless she is. What of Branwell? Well, I honestly believe that I've been unfair to him, and that therefore all he has done was completely justified. Indeed, that's why he keeps mentioning karma. He seems to know the price of everything and the value of nothing, and has been left with a huge sense of entitlement, devoid of any self-reliance impulse, although to a degree that could be said of Widati. I have noticed his energy in my tarot readings, in which I was accused of having betrayed the family, which I have to accept that I did, and ran off with a young floozy. That Maddie would dump me as soon as my money ran out, and that my real family would that my real family would never take me back. With this in mind, I doubt if I could ever trust Branwell again, even though I am anticipating a confession by him, along with his bad-mouthing of his mother. What will he confess? Will he let me know that I'm not his father? Will he tell me that he was working with his mother? Or will I simply get another barely believable story? Then how can I possibly know that this is not another scheme to extract money from me? Since leaving the UK, nobody has offered me any work, despite me having the skills, time on my hand, and willing to work for very little. Then there are people I left my possessions with to sell, never sent me any money. These will be the flying monkeys, roped into my ex-partner's plans to bankrupt me, and so every time I claimed to Branwell that I was close to bankruptcy, he and his mother were delighted. So can I trust anyone in the UK, including Patrick? Maybe not. Of course, I've always known that my ex-partner would poison everyone in the UK against me, but I had no idea just how far this reaching and malicious this would be. Now really has come the time to turn my back on the UK, to focus on Maddie and Java, which probably includes taking up Indonesian citizenship. I do not take such decisions lightly. Maybe I will never visit my country of birth again, never walk on the Staper Stones, nor around the Dingle again. But such is the impact of psychopathic abuse, I must break off contact so completely. This probably means never visiting the UK again. All of this would explain the huge despair which took over me when Maddie lost her mind, as it coincided with nothing going to plan in the UK, and being harangued by Branwell for money I didn't have. The endless nights I tried to send a supposedly starving son money, or trying to order a takeaways from him from the other side of the world, and spent hours downloading software to book him somewhere to stay. All the time when I was struggling to cope with life in this strange country, after my wife's mind had been taken from her, I felt helpless, and to a large extent I was. But over the years I've raised my vibrations, and once again I'm ready to face the world, however cruel it can be. All 4 of my episodes thus far have focused on black magic and how the mischief of young uni had destroyed my life. I have traced the incredible events which have shaped my life since arriving in Indonesia nearly 6 years ago. But now I must realise that large parts of what has happened to me was being orchestrated by my ex-partner in the UK. Maybe had my mind not been so swamped with emotions as I had when I'd been hypnotised, I could have been stronger for Maddie. But when Maddie lost her mind, I was reliant on her here in Indonesia and unable to take a lead. My whole world collapsed, if not overnight, certainly over a year, and with it my ability for rational thinking and action. I could go further. I was going to say that nobody forced me to go to Indonesia, which is true, but it was another psychopath, Professor Darwin, that encouraged me. But it was my enthusiasm for searching for business in Southeast Asia, driven by my desire to escape from my ex-partner. Certainly the consequences of this strategy were disastrous, but I could not stand to be in my apartment under the constant abuse of my partner any longer. The sensible thing to do would have been to move out, maybe start a new life away from Manchester, maybe Shrewsbury. But then I was also running from my mother in Shrewsbury. Then again I was committed to keeping the family together for the sake of Branwell, despite him and his mother accusing me of the exact opposite. It is possible to continue to see everything that happened as black magic, or indeed all as the work of a psychopath. But the truth probably lies somewhere between these two. We've been in Jakarta now for nearly a month, and with the health restrictions are effectively stuck here, although I do understand that the same restrictions are in place in Gunung Kidul. Across Jakarta and Java, people are being forced to take rapid tests, especially if they fail to wear a 3-ply mask, i.e. the neoprene masks are not acceptable, which if positive, despite their inaccuracy, may result being quarantined in hotels, which you have to pay for. Indeed, this is exactly what happened to Widati's friend, that prompted her to take the test. It would seem that Widati is worried about these tests, especially if she visits a hospital, but she is also worried about the outcome of her operation. My immediate reaction was anger, as I always do when plans are changed. But Maddie's calmness quickly calmed me down. We resolved to wait until Widati is ready and to return to Gunung Kidul when we're able to, awaiting Widati to tell us that she is ready for the operation. Now, I don't like this feeling of being out of control, especially when it's my money which is being spent, but I must relinquish this desire and allow life to send to me what it will. Like us all, I'm frustrated. 4 years ago, we were completely obsessed with our paranoia induced by black magic, unable to leave a normal life. Then for 3 years, our lives have been in limbo as we recovered from the effects of paranoia and lead poisoning. Now I'm anxious to change. But what world events mean that I'm a spectator to my own life, once again living for the day and allowing issues to float over me? But could this whole episode be more about Maddie's and mine awakening? Are our reaction to Widati's needs a test of our character? Then the lack of money that was paid back to me was a part of the dark night of the soul. It was showing me that all around me were narcissists, and whilst I must understand that it's better to walk away than to believe that a narcissist could ever believe another person, so important to repay their debts to them. Shortly after writing this, compulsory vaccinations were announced in Indonesia. certainly for the islands of Java and Bali. Once again, Maddie was calming. She reminded me of the ability of Indonesia's policymakers to frighten the public before backing down. Of course, she's correct. How could the government get hold of 450 million vaccines, refrigerated transport them, including for remote and difficult terrains, and enough medical staff to fulfil their aims? Such policies opening up Indonesians to corruption and fraudsters. But maybe this time the fraud is part of China's vaccine diplomacy within a global plan. As this was announced following Wang Yi's visit to Indonesia and further trade deals as an expression to build a global community of health for all. Later it was announced that the vaccines were only for the under 60s, which provided some reassurance to me. But would this mean that the over 60s would have their movements restricted? Later this policy reversed, but still no vaccines. Certainly some countries and airlines are reported to be insisting on vaccines, but I'm not sure if I could access one to comply with their restrictions. This escalated, so I do not anticipate being able to fly until 2023, although maybe internal flights will not have the same restrictions. Even Widati is beginning to find flaws in the official version of what is happening, while still believing almost everything she sees on the media, even on product packaging. Indeed, she recently bought some expensive honey on the basis of its packaging, which claims to be natural and original. These are words she uses that are interchangeable with quality, but with no objective definition of their meanings. Whilst Widati rejects the superb quality honey that I buy from Sumbawa, whose packaging is somewhat dated, but not dated enough to be trendy. Widati's stupidity has long been a source of amusement to Maddie and I. But I now wonder if Widati isn't a perfect citizen, or should I use the word consumer, the one governments and businesses want us to be. However, Widati is also very troubled, having studied for so long and been unable to find work, getting old for Indonesia, and still unmarried, and contemplated when is the right time to have her operation. TT is feeling the impact of her sister's uncertainty and claims that if she is asked, would marry in a flash to escape from Widati. I recalled how I'd done a tarot reading for Leo for February, and it showed how I'd be troubled by many things, but a divine feminine, a queen of love, would soothe things over us, and I should put my trust in her. So does this really mean that I've got my Maddie back and I can relinquish some of the control and certainly worry to her? Yes, I may be relying on my tarot a little too much, but that's me. What this incident does tell me is that Maddie is really back to being the Ratu, queen I fell in love with, and no longer troubled by the paranormal, nor indeed anything us mere mortals are. You see, we're both all too aware of major changes which we accept and live from day to day, making each day special. But more than this, we are both aware that ultimately things are going to work out well for us. Indeed, Maddie is dreaming extensively once more about snakes and crocodiles and the Duke and brother, but no longer sees the worst. No, like I, she knows these to indicate major changes, but somehow we will come out on top. With this renewed optimism, we can create our own good fortune, and that truly is the meaning of life that I have spent so long exploring. Indeed, for some time I've been aware of how Maddie has exerted her divine feminine on the desa in Gunung Kidul, but I now suspect that it is working once more in Jakarta. I also began to dream of somewhat negative things, but would not describe them as nightmares, although did one night cry out about what I have no idea. No, my dreams are of negative outcomes, which somehow not only doesn't seem so bad, but there's an overwhelming feeling of them bringing me new opportunities. My being stuck in Jakarta is indicative of this. I would much sooner be back in Gunung Kidul, even with the restrictions, but somehow I feel there are more opportunities for me in Jakarta. It's difficult for me to see what these new opportunities are, with me largely under house arrest and my internet use somewhat restricted. Oh, once again, an interaction on YouTube upset me. Such interactions have a pattern. The person appears innocent and asks you a question which you neither fully comprehend nor care about. As you attempt to respond around their question, they become more and more aggressive in demanding that you directly answer their question. When you point out that their aggression, they assure you that they're not being aggressive, but continue to demand you answer their narrow question. But as soon as you answer it, they pounce on you, as the question was some sort of a trick to illustrate your stupidity. Once I spotted this interaction followed the same pattern, I deleted my responses. I'm not sure why I did it, but it seemed appropriate. The result is an even more violent response, including provocative comments to my own site, to which I left a heart. Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. Attributed to George Bernard Shaw. So not only was I dealing with a psychopath, but it's likely that all such interactions are psychopaths. Like my ex-partner, he mocked religion, although he'd falsely assumed me to be a Christian. Maybe I'm now better placed to spot these provocations. I do hope so, as being an empath, I got little sleep that night, despite this person being a complete stranger to me. I also hope that I can resist the temptation to be accommodating when I'm clearly being set up. That is, I'm attracting such people is testament to my increasing vibrations, that others can now feel my power and attracted to it, and not all will be honourable in their intent. On investigation, this individual, he reminded me of Branwell. He was well educated, but something had clearly gone wrong, and now he appears to be living, and now he does not appear to be living a fulfilling life. He appears to spend his time picking arguments with people on the internet. Some, unlike me, who maybe are deserving of the attention. He does so in a way which shows no empathy for his victims and is determined to beat them to a pulp with his arguments, just as my ex-partner did. But to what purpose? He seems to be on a mission, but a mission to achieve what? I'm sure he would respond, the truth. But when he is unprepared to listen to anything but his truth, the mission is exposed as an obsession. I must be mindful that some narcissists actually thrive on the tension and animosity which they feel towards them. My tarot has been suggesting that Branwell would re-establish contact with me. Was it he and not really Branwell? Or was it simply a test to see if I was prepared? As I was contemplating this interaction, I know normal people simply forget about it. I remembered a phrase from cognitive behavioural therapists: you're not responsible for others disliking you. I then remembered that this was told to me by my ex-partner after she'd accessed support due to postnatal depression. I'd always believed her to be bipolar, as she would have months of frantic activity, often including love bombing, followed by months of depression. A pattern which was very discernible in Professor Darwin, as he dreamt up new schemes following the collapse of the previous, and moved from victim to victim. Such postnatal depression seemed to fit in with this pattern, but I now wonder if depression is an attempt to gain sympathy. Was my ex-partner attempting to hide her psychopathy by feigning depression? Certainly her therapist concluded concluded with her that the depression was due to me working away from home. Postnatal depression, however, would provide something of an explanation for Branwell's troubles, as if his mother failed to respond to him during a depression. This can result in a myriad of psychological problems. Then there is that look his mother can give to people, which seems to embody pure hatred. There is the total darkness in her eyes, like the psychopath is possessed by a jinn. I first encountered it when I was out drinking with her and her cousins. I was so unnerved by it that I wanted to end our relationship then and there, as I should have, but was persuaded that it was just the beer talking. Years later, she gave that same look to an old girlfriend of mine who has never communicated to me since. Again, what impact would this have on a baby? Or was postnatal depression simply to provide an excuse not to go back to work, to set a pattern that I should be the sole provider? Nevertheless, the mood swings that I observed are also indicative of psychopathy. Indeed, around a third of sociopaths are also bipolar, although I am not sure that either my partner or Professor Darwin could be described as sociopaths. But this does not preclude my ex-partner using the situation for her devious plans, as it is so apparent during world events at the moment. So the tarot are indeed correct that the revelations keep coming, as they will during the dark night of the soul, and I must prepare for the big one that is being predicted. Also, I have a debt to the anonymous narcissist who attacked me on YouTube, for without his abuse, I would never have thought about these events. Well, that concludes this chapter from my fourth book, The Phoenix and the Creatures of Darkness. And it's actually the final in this series of books. I'm not saying I won't write another book, but I feel this series is now complete. I really hoped you enjoyed it. And now I'm going to add a new chapter every week to this book. So if you want to hear about it, subscribe and hit the bell. Now, I'm not doing particularly well with these eBay, YouTube algorithms. So if you could hit the like button and make some comments, I think it helps me. I hate to ask you for this. I hate it when I hear people coming out with this sort of statement. But the truth is that this has been like a full-time job for the last 4 years of my life. And I'm still a long way off from receiving any money whatsoever for it. So I really do need to, I suppose, beg you. Subscribe, like, make comments. And thank you very much. Thanks.